Subscribe if you never want to miss another scary story. If you are subscribed, be sure to click the notification bell and the like button. Thank you. Toys R Us is closing down for good, at least in the United States, which makes now the perfect time for creepy confessions and stories from this once massive toy store franchise. You're watching Darkness Prevails, the best place to share your creepy stories with the world, because this world is a strange one. I remember when I was little, walking through Toys R Us with my parents, wishing that all the colorful items on the shelves could be mine. After hearing these allegedly true scary stories from Toys R Us, you might just rethink your toy store memories. If you want to be in a future video, I'd love to hear some creepy experiences from forest rangers. If you've got a story, send it to me at darknessprevails.org/submit. Now then, who wants to play with my toys? Number 1. Walking to my car. Submitted by DENNISM. Believe it or not, I greatly enjoyed working at Toys R Us at our location in southern Missouri. I'd been working there for the past 5 years. It was a fun job with fair pay. I admit, I'm gonna miss the place after it's closed down with the rest of them. After all, how hard is it to ring up customers and stock toys? The worst part was the screaming kids, but there really wasn't even much of that. Maybe it was because the town was so small, I don't know for sure. Anyway, for the first few years I worked there, they had me on an opening to closing schedule, which was great by me. I loved staying in the loop at work. Being there all day, you don't really miss any updates, plus it was a lot of hours. During that time, I had a number of irritating and creepy experiences alike. It even started from day one. But the biggest of all these happenings wasn't the customers, it wasn't the coworkers, and no, the store wasn't haunted. Rather, it was the area around the store. I wouldn't say there was a forest around the place, but there were quite a bit of trees surrounding the streets outside. You wouldn't think there was a lot of wildlife, given most of the trees were planted by people and acted as decoration. But let me just say one thing. There was something living in those trees. I'm sorry if I've lost you here. You may have been expecting some sort of stalker or creepy person, but that's not what my story is about. My story is about my scattered experiences over the years, with something that terrified me. It would happen only when I'd walk out to my car at night after the store closed. Way back when I started, I'd park my little red Cobalt on the right side of the store away from other people. I've never trusted people. My parents had gotten a new car once, and on that same day when they went out for dinner, some jerk had keyed the entire front half of it for no reason. So, yeah, I kept my most expensive belonging, my car, away from the customers in the parking lot as much as I could. But, as I would come to find out, this was a horrible idea. I believe it was my second month. I'd finally gotten a handle on my duties and my work schedule. I was walking to my car, searching the deep pockets in my annoying black work pants, when I heard something from above. Immediately, I stopped. I raised an eyebrow and looked around. I remember thinking, the heck was that? My first guess was a bird, but it sounded heavier than that, so I started thinking it was some kid climbing the trees. At this time of night, though, I wondered. I walked faster to my car. By then, there was only about 20 yards left between my escape and my current position. When I was only 10 yards away, I heard the noise again, yet it was still from just above me, the same distance away as before, meaning that the thing in the trees had followed me from tree to tree, or maybe there were multiple things up there. When I realized I was standing still again, I shook it off and hurried to my car door. I unlocked the door, sat down inside, and lucky old me, I dropped the keys through the crack of the closing door as I sat down. My door was shut, and my keys were outside on the ground. Any sane person would quickly open the door and grab their keys, right? I was half a second away from doing just that when I heard a very disturbing sound. First, there was a large and violent rustling of leaves from the line of trees I'd been walking by, which continued on past my car. Then a heavy thud as something dropped onto the ground, just beside my passenger door. I remember swallowing air and instantly turning my head to the passenger side window. That's when things got eerily quiet. I waited, basically holding my breath, hoping to see some kid running across the street, laughing after having scared the guy walking to his car. But I saw nothing and heard nothing for a while. Yet I never budged. My keys remained on the ground outside, which meant I couldn't drive home and get back to safety. My mind was racing as I tried to convince myself to move, to just reach outside fast and grab those keys. I must have waited there for another 10 minutes before I finally calmed down. The plan was to do it in an instant. Open the door, yank the keys from the ground, shut the door. Easy peasy, right? I opened the door, I reached for the keys on the pavement, and I stopped. Because there was a shadow on the ground coming from under the open door, and there was something breathing just on the other side. Before I could even make out any details of the shadowy figure, I grabbed the keys, I started my car, and I began to race away. But I did glance in my rearview mirror, and I managed to see something terrible. It was a four-legged silhouette crawling back up the tree. Whatever it was roughly the size of a golden retriever, but it was solid brown with extremely long hair. After this experience, I began parking toward the front of the store, hoping that would fix all of my problems. Though I never got that close to encountering the creature again, I still continued to hear something in those trees at the side of the building. Something large that had me walking to my car faster and faster each night. That's my horror story. I don't know what the animal was, but if you're ever at the old lot of a Toys R Us in southern Missouri and you see a row of trees at the side of the building, you might want to steer clear because you're probably not alone. Number 2. I'm Not Gonna Miss Toys R Us, submitted by LANEY T. A couple of years ago, I worked at a local Toys R Us for a few months. It was a location in Oklahoma, and it was the worst job I've ever had. While my coworkers were nice, I despised the customers. I've never been good with people, and I've worked jobs before in customer service, but there was something about the people who regularly came into our Toys R Us. Literally most of them were irritable, angry, fed up, and sometimes even creepy. I tried my best to work my register with a smile, but it didn't take long for that to be drained right out of me. For example, there was a lady who wasn't happy with the speed at which I rung up her items. I was new at the time, and I was trying to be as fast and efficient as possible. Even still, she ended up reaching over the counter and just barely missed as she tried to slap me. Then there was the guy who followed me to my car and sat down on the ground behind my vehicle. I had to get some of my coworkers to drag the psycho away from my vehicle so I could actually go home. I'd never seen the guy before. I still don't know why he did that. What really takes the cake was the homeless-looking person who stayed after hours. We were closing down the store one night, but I recalled seeing a strange-looking and awfully tall man walk in maybe 7 minutes before we closed. As we started locking up, I mentioned to my manager that the tall, ragged-looking man never left, so he asked if we could all start checking the aisles. I walked into the girls' toy sections, slowly checking up and down each aisle and calling out to anyone who might be there that we were closing. After checking each aisle twice, I moved on to the furthest aisles from the front of the store, the newborns and babies section, the place where they keep strollers, diapers, etc. I made my way from the middle to the back corner, from diapers and toys to strollers. I hadn't seen anyone, no trace of a person there, not until I got to the very corner. And there he was. He was about 6'6", dressed in a ragged, lengthy overcoat, which nearly touched the ground. He was facing away from me, seemingly staring straight down onto the bottom shelves of boxed strollers. Sir," I called out, albeit a bit nervously. "We're closing now. If you could, please bring your items to the front so we could get you on your way." He didn't budge even an inch. Instead, he just kept looking down at that angle. I took a step toward him. Sir?" And then he started shaking, no, convulsing, as he stood there. It wasn't like he was having a seizure or something. Oddly enough, it was more like he was vibrating. I'm not sure if that even makes sense. Even so, it was deeply unsettling. When he turned toward me, I finally saw his face. From his eyes, mouth, and nose, there were streams of red flowing from them. I screamed, turned, and ran. In only a few moments, my coworkers found me in tears and shaking. I pointed to where the man was, and they ran over to the corner of the building. But they came back in only a few seconds. "Laney, there's no one over there," my manager explained. I said no, there had to be, yet there was no trace of the guy. None of us, not even me, saw him exit the building. I kept thinking he had to be in here somewhere. I ended up getting the okay to leave right after that, getting to skip out on my closing duties, because honestly, I was a bit traumatized. I tried to keep the scene from my mind, but it was impossible. I got no sleep that night, and because of that, I thought about calling in sick the next day. Oddly enough, work called me, asking me to come in to take a look at something. When I arrived, they brought me to the back of the building, in a room with about 12 little CCTVs, with feeds from the security cameras. "Laney, if you can, would you look at this footage for us?" my manager asked. I nodded and sat down. Another employee in the room with us clicked a button on a remote, and one of the small screens began to play. I saw me at the bottom of the screen. The camera was facing directly at the corner of the strollers section, exactly where the man had been standing. I then saw myself scream, yet the corner remained empty. The man never even appeared in the tape, not a single frame of his existence. Look, I don't know what I saw that night, who I saw. Maybe I have some sort of mental problem or delusion, but I know I saw something in that store, and I'll never forget my few months working there. I'll be frank with you, I'm very glad Toys R Us is closing down. Number 3. Toys R Us Demon Child, submitted by Ohio Gal 87. I'm 31 years old and from Cleveland, Ohio. This story is an old one, but it still sticks out in my mind all these years later, especially when I go shopping. I break out in a nervous sweat because of what I saw so many years ago. No one I've told about this has ever believed me, not friends, family, or coworkers. They all give me this sideways glance, and some of them even mutter that I'm crazy behind my back. But I know I'm not. I know what I saw, and I will never forget it. The story takes place in 2003 in my hometown. The Iraq War had just kicked off, and my dad, who was in the Air Force, was stationed in Qatar. That left just me, my mom, and my Aunt Tracy. She was a bit of a wild child, and at age 18 had gotten herself pregnant. She kept the kid, and my dad took pity on her and let her live with us. At the time, her son Matthew was turning 5. I actually liked Matthew a lot more than Tracy, and I wanted to get him something nice for his birthday. I ended up going to Toys R Us to see what your typical hyperactive 5-year-old might enjoy. It was a beautiful September day, much warmer than normal, so I was glad to be inside the air-conditioned store. There were kids running around everywhere, dragging their aggrieved parents from aisle to aisle. I had to smile. I was the same way as a child. I always loved my dolls and constantly wanted a new one. Anyway, I wandered the aisles, trying to think of something we could have fun doing together, since Tracy was often off with her girlfriends and paid less attention to Matthew than he deserved. Then it came to me, the Lego aisle. Everybody loves Legos, and I did too as a kid, and a little bit now, to be honest. I hustled off to the Lego aisle, which happened to be at the very back of the store. But as I approached the second to last aisle, I paused. A weird feeling came over me, a sudden, totally random sense of dread building in my stomach. I paused, glancing around. If it was affecting anyone else, no one really showed it. They were going about their business normally. Kids running around, parents trying to control them. Everyone else acting normal, and it helped relax me for a moment. So I took a deep breath and walked toward the Lego aisle. I turned the corner, and I froze. The store was packed. You couldn't go down any of the aisles without seeing at least 3 families perusing the merchandise, with a couple of employees trying to help them. But the Lego aisle was suspiciously silent and empty, all except for one kid in a dark gray hoodie with his hood pulled up. He was standing alone in the middle of the aisle, sideways to me, looking intently at the Lego sets stacked neatly along the shelves. But that uneasy feeling returned. My good Samaritan instincts pushed it aside. Here was a child, alone in the aisle, and maybe even lost. I put on my best smile, and I approached him. I stooped down to his eye level and asked, "Hey, are you The words stuck in my throat, because when the kid turned around and looked at me, it felt like my soul died inside me. His eyes were black, deep, soulless. I mean pitch black. His skin was deathly, terribly pale, and when those inky black eyes met with mine, he smiled. But his smile was way too wide, stretching up over his cheeks, mouth wider than I thought humanly possible, and his parted lips revealed a mouth full of needle-like teeth. My mouth flapped uselessly. Dimly, I felt a warm trickle of urine running down my leg, and my heart nearly burst when it spoke to me.
"Hello, Jessica,"
it said in a voice nightmarishly deep and harsh, and then it hit me. The thing knew my name.
"I'm so lonely. Won't you play with me, please?"
It reached out with one hand, a hand that looked disturbingly normal and childlike, palm up, as if inviting me to take it. That was what broke me out of my trance. I turned around and blasted out of that aisle, skidding as I made my turn and upending a display. An employee saw and shouted at me, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to stop running until that thing was a distant memory in my rearview mirror. I dove into my car, slammed the keys into the ignition, and I started it. I burnt rubber pulling out, and I glanced up to see a store manager waving and shouting wildly at me, and behind him, leaning out from behind his legs, was the child. He was waving as well, grinning that maniacal alien grin and staring at me with cold, lifeless black eyes. I sped out of there, and I never looked back. It's been years now, and I'm still not sure what it was. I've no doubt heard of the black-eyed kids, but I'm not entirely sure that's what it was. They seem to show up mostly at night and look much more normal than what I saw. Maybe he was a demon, but why was I the only one that seemed to notice it? I'm still unsure. Maybe I really am going crazy, but in case I'm not, crazy Toys R Us demon, let's never meet again. Number 4. Creepy Guy at Toys R Us. Submitted by David17. This memory is a bit hazy, mostly because I was only 4 years old, but the thought of it still sticks with me. My mom was taking me to Toys R Us. It was a reward for me learning how to count to 10, and my mom may have been a tad bit too excited about it. As we pulled up in the parking lot, I got so anxious, I almost crossed the street without holding my mom's hand. When we walked through the sliding doors, I was amazed, and I wanted to look at all the toys. However, my mom walked toward the backpack section. I didn't want to wait any longer, so I bolted off to the area with the toys, and I began to scour through everything I wanted. That wasn't the best decision, as I was soon lost shortly after. I brushed it off, and I continued to look at the toys a bit more. Successfully distracting myself, I was a bit more comfortable. But that was short-lived, as suddenly a very tall and lanky man, who appeared to be in his mid-30s, approached me. He had a shaved face, glasses, and pretty long hair for a guy. He smiled at me and asked, "Hey, are you lost, little guy?" I felt awkward for a second, and then replied honestly, "Yeah, I can't find my mommy." He smiled even more and said that he'd help me find my mother. But first he said he needed to use the bathroom. He grabbed my hand and began to drag me along. Soon he was tugging and pulling me faster and harder, which really hurt my hand. As we were approaching the bathroom, I heard my mom from a far distance screaming for me, "David!" Even then, the man did not let up. He brought me into the stall and told me to undo my pants. "My mom says I shouldn't talk to strangers," I said, even though it was a little late for that. He reached out toward me, but shortly after, we heard a man barge in through the bathroom door. I can't remember if he unlocked the stall or just busted the lock, but he got in fast enough and dragged the man outside. But before that happened, I remember the man looking down at me and saying, "Our playtime's not over yet." I was brought back to my mom, who was crying, and I was so confused at the entire situation. All of it happened so suddenly. I was taken to counseling for a while to help me forget about this point in my life. As I've grown up and reflected on that point in my life, I've realized that those 30 seconds or so have screwed up so many aspects of my social life as a child. Still, to this day, I have an irrational distrust of adult men, and I stay withdrawn from other people. Keep your kids close at all times in public. Trusting your children isn't the problem, it's trusting strangers. And number 5, Creepy Toys R Us Experience, submitted by Tyler. The Toys R Us near my house shut down about a week ago, so on the final day of its going out of business sale, Me and my friend Oliver decided to go see all of the cheap stuff that nobody else wanted. When we arrived, everything was as I expected it to be. The employees that were left were walking around nonchalantly. The store was almost completely barren, and several customers were buying whatever they could from the shelves, some excited and others desperate. I got about $7 worth of candy while my friend used their toilet. I headed over to the cashier. She rung me up and I waited for Oliver. Around 4 minutes later, he came out toward the exit and we started to walk to my house. But when we passed a nearby car wash, Oliver said he had forgotten his phone. And by some bizarre coincidence, I also forgot my wallet. So I gave him the bag of candy and my house keys, and I said I'd get our stuff and meet him at the house. I walked back into the Toys R Us, and I went to the front register. The obviously high teenager at the front desk gave me my wallet, but no phone. So I walked to the toilets to retrieve the phone. When I opened the creaky door, everything immediately felt off. I wasn't scared, more unsettled. I saw my friend's phone right by the sink, and I grabbed it. As I went to leave, the door just wouldn't open. Right away, I shouted for the employees or anyone that could hear me, but from the outside, the door never opened. When I was still struggling to pull the door, the stall doors behind me suddenly shot right open, and then they closed. This surprised me so badly, I almost shot out of my skin, and then the lights turned off. I felt like crying, but my mood changed when I felt the hand on my ankle. As soon as I inhaled deeply to scream, the door opened. Oliver was right in front of me. I was crying, and behind me, everything was back to normal. The lights were on, the stalls were closed and still, and there was nobody else in the bathroom with me. I ran past Oliver, and I didn't stop running until I couldn't see the store behind me. Oliver eventually caught up with me, and I told him everything. I haven't told anyone else in person, because I know how unrealistic it sounds, but to this day, it still haunts me. I'm pretty glad the worst thing I've ever experienced at a Toys R Us was getting lost when I was around 5 and crying my eyes out as a stranger led me right around the corner to find my parents who happened to be only a few feet away. Luckily, I haven't experienced anything beyond that. No creepers, stalkers, or haunts. So I consider myself lucky. But just because Toys R Us is going out of business doesn't mean there won't be more places where terrifying new things can happen to you. Good night. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Be sure to send me your Forest Ranger stories soon at darknessprevails.org/submit. If you want to support my channel, here are a few things you can do. Like the video, click the notification bell, go to darknessprevails.org/app and download my app. Donate $1 a month on Patreon to get your name in the credits, or get a cool creepy shirt, mug, and more at morbidmonsters.com. Now then, here are my 5 favorite early comments from the previous video about 5 true horror stories from high school. Kane7ify says, "Take that, Zac Efron." That makes me wonder, how would a High School Musical horror movie go? Banana Warrior says, "Did you know the bird is the word?" I didn't know, but I have heard that the bird is in fact the word. Messiah says, "I hope everything's going alright with you, Darkness. I greatly appreciate that. I'm doing a bit better, trying to control stress. This channel still isn't where I want it to be, and I'm torn about what new content would work for this channel. Let me know what you think in the comments." Unethical Entertainment says, "What would you do if you saw the girl from The Ring crawl out of your TV?" 3 words, Netflix and chill. And Brandy Waldrop says, "My bedtime voice. You helped me sleep with nightmares. Now, Brandy, that's not a very nice thing to say about your significant other. Anyway, as always, guys, thank you so much for listening and sticking around for this video. More horror is coming soon. Until then, stay safe out there and stay creepy.